it's not like I'm meeting anyone new. And I think with COVID, people stopped trying to meet physically. So it's like if you're having any meetings, it's more so about trying to catch up with someone, but not that necessity of, let's have a physical meeting. So everything kind of went digital. So it's almost like COVID was a springboard to just make things easier. And every time I think, let me go back to SA, touch base with people, I have to think twice to be like, what would I be doing there? I'd probably be at home. I wouldn't be seeing people anyways. So yeah, the transition, I think, just getting over that psychology, kind of that psychological barrier of, I'm somewhere else, people think I can't handle the work anymore, etc. But my team are still in SA, I think the needs are still there. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but I think I didn't see it so much as letting that go, but kind of like building on that.
Welcome to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. I'm your host, Kojo Baffoe. In this podcast, I speak to Africans from across a multitude of sectors, including business, art, culture, media, design, technology, advertising, and everything in between, delving into their journeys and reflecting on the lessons they have learned along the way. It's about gaining insight into why and how they do what they do. These conversations offer a treasure trove of takeaways on a wide range of topics, including craft, relationships, wellness, parenting, entrepreneurship, and much more. Where are you right now?
I'm in Washington, D.C., the U.S.
What are you doing in Trump's Yankee?
This is home now.
Is it?
Yes.
So somebody asked me recently where home is for me. Now you were born in Ghana, you've lived in South Africa for ages, now you're saying America's home. How do you define home?
That's a really good question. And I think it's probably the first time I've actually said I live in the US, because I'm always like, between the US and Joburg. For the longest time, if you asked me that, I would have said Eastern Cape, where my parents are. And I think now it's like home is where my husband is. So, yeah.
Is that what took you to America?
Yes. I would not have moved here if it wasn't for love. I've always been in an African country before coming to the US.
I mean, you have, we'll get into the businesses, but you'd built quite a solid foundation for yourself in South Africa. How easy is it to just go, okay, well, for love, I'm going to not necessarily leave all that behind because we live in a new era, but literally the place where you had established very strong roots to now leave that?
I think in the beginning it was more of the mental challenge than anything, because like you mentioned now, it's like we're in a digital era. So every time I was in the States, I was still able to work because I pretty much need a laptop and internet, so I'm good to go. But just that psychology of, people know I'm not in SA, how will they respond to doing business with me and things like that. And I soon realized that the type of clients that I'm looking for now in my career are the ones that are actually happy that, new territories that you're opening up. Yes, what's happening in the US? How can we work together there? And the ones that I need to let go are the ones who want me to be hanging on in SA and want me physically there. I think I don't say I've outgrown the space, but I have a solid kind of foundation in SA. Particularly working in the PR space. There are not that many new media publications and platforms that come. So those long-standing relationships are there. And, with the new ones, it's easy to kind of connect, just having built, traction in the space after a while. So it's not like I'm meeting anyone new. And I think with COVID, people stopped trying to meet physically.
Mm.
So it's like if you're having any meetings, it's more so about trying to catch up with someone, but not that necessity of, let's have a physical meeting. So everything kind of went digital. So it's almost like COVID was a springboard to just make things easier. And every time I think, let me go back to SA, touch base with people, I have to think twice to be like, what would I be doing there? I'd probably be at home. I wouldn't be seeing people anyways. So yeah, the transition, I think, just getting over that psychology, kind of that psychological barrier of, oh, I'm somewhere else, people think I can't handle the work anymore, etc. But my team are still in SA. I think the roots are still there. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but I think I didn't see it so much as letting that go, but kind of like building on that.
But now you have to manage time zones.
Yes. In the beginning, I was trying to keep up with it. Now I'm just like, no, I have a team. I don't need to be doing things at 4:00 in the morning, my time. And yeah, if I want to do things dictated at my time, so I will do things that are a bit, later afternoon SA time, that works for me.
How does Ghana fit into everything? Does it fit into everything?
Yes. So maybe every immigrant person who's, had a family that's immigrated from the country might relate in terms of parents who kind of ground you or kind of root you in your traditions. So even though, when I was young and we hadn't had many trips back to Ghana, it was very instilled in me that I'm a Ghanaian person. Like we had community, we had, we ate traditional food. So I was raised as a Ghanaian person. And then later in life, when I was old enough to travel on my own and do stuff, I started visiting Ghana a bit more. And I was actually toying with the idea of moving there. Just there's a sense of home when you go to Ghana. And that's something that everyone says. It doesn't matter where you come from, you go to Ghana and you just feel a sense of home. Everyone's warm and welcome, very hospitable. So just in terms of identity, that's something that's very strong there. And then as my businesses grew, it's a territory that we expanded to. So we do offer PR and radio plugging services in Ghana.
Yeah, I mean, and I've had this conversation with multiple, let's call it first generation, diaspora Ghanaians, just in terms of navigating and internally navigating identity. Because, I mean, like you, my father moved to Lesotho when I was very young, but my father actually wasn't living in Ghana. So my experience of Ghana was when I was 5 or before I was 5, and then when I was 38. And literally there was this major disconnect between, this major gap between where I didn't interact with Ghana. But my favorite food is fufu and groundnut soup, because growing up, that's what, gatherings of the community, you have all the food, you have some of the traditions, and also Ghanaians have an interesting way of incorporating let's call it their ritual and their habits into day-to-day life, regardless of where you are. So I found at some stage that there were certain things I did and certain ways I thought that were very Ghanaian and very German. But also going back, it feels like there's a little bit of a disconnect. So people will be warm and welcoming, but have you ever felt not Ghanaian enough?
So you're still an other. So you go there and you're like an other, and you're in SA and you're an other. It's just, yeah. I think with Ghana and that sense of being home is that even though they can tell, oh, you're not from here, so you're an outsider, but how you received is different. Versus in SA, if you're an outsider, it's like you don't belong here. But in Ghana, it's like you're an outsider, but hey, you belong here, we want you here. And that ethos, I think they even do with people that aren't Ghanaian. It's like, okay, you're not from here, but you're welcome. So if I had maybe moved to Ghana younger, maybe there would have been a bigger disconnect in terms of, okay, I'm Ghanaian, but I'm not really one of the people here and I'm seen as different, and how that would have been, I'm not too sure. But as an adult, it was just more kind of, a way to connect with other Ghanaian people. And I think, honestly, when you're there on holiday, you probably also meet other people who are there on holiday, if they're not related to you that live there. So it's almost like my experience, almost like relatable in terms of, someone grew up in Germany or France or the US, and now I'm in Ghana. So you have the commonality of how your parents raised you. It's like you'll see any African mother meme and you can just relate and identify, and just, how your kind of educational path was, you just have to excel in school, do this, how it's like people treat dating. So many like commonalities, but I'm not actually sure whether the average person living in Ghana has that same experience. So that's interesting. I think, my cousins might have a very different Ghanaian parents versus a diasporic person.
Yeah. Because even before the whole year of the return stuff, I was always fascinated because I went to Ghana Christmas and Easter in consecutive years, and you'll hear different accents. Like you'll see the person is Ghanaian, but you're in town, you're at the market, and you're hearing the different accents because like I always say, Ghanaians have traversed the world for years on end. So how did your parents end up in Eastern Cape?
So back in the day when they had like the whole Transkei Ciskei thing, I think just there weren't enough service providers providing services for Black people. So my dad's a medical doctor, and they needed doctors to work in hospitals. So he immigrated for work, and a lot of the Ghanaians that also came there. So you were doctors, there were accountants, there were teachers, and they were working in like Black schools, or predominantly kind of your former Bantu schools and Black hospitals and things like that. So we immigrated in the 80s. That's how we ended up in South Africa.
Yeah, so there's an interesting history because in the 70s, a lot of Ghanaians moved to places like Lesotho and Eswatini for opportunities. A lot of them were teachers and lecturers. That's how my father ended up in Lesotho. And when the homelands came, and Ciskei and Transkei, there were a lot of Ghanaians who actually left places like Lesotho to move to the Eastern Cape. So when I tell people that they're Ghanaians from the Eastern Cape, and there's a big community, they're always surprised. So it's interesting that you're part of that batch.
Yes. So I think if you've been in SA, I guess during apartheid, but maybe even in the 90s, so 90s and before, chances are you started off in the Eastern Cape. So I think maybe when I moved to Joburg, then I found out that there were some Ghanaians who were in like the Mapikeng, like the Northwest area. But the assumption was always that, you were either from Butterworth or Mthatha or somewhere in the Eastern Cape.
Kings, maybe even Alice.
Yeah, so I grew up in King Williamstown.
Okay.
Yes.
My father, interestingly enough, got married in King Williamstown.
Oh, wow.
At some stage. There was a Shoehorn Motel, I think it was called. Like we hung out and partied there. I was a teenager by then, so I was his best man.
Oh, nice.
So how do you studied in Cape Town?
Yes.
If I had met you at like 12, 13, 14 and asked you what you want to be when you grow up, what would have been your answer?
A doctor. Like without hesitation. It's just you either kind of follow the path, your parents followed or like you're exposed to, or being a doctor was one of the pretty much the three options. As doctor, lawyer, accountant. That's kind of like where they wanted it's kind of like, I can't remember them ever sitting down and being like, these are your 3 options. But I think just through various conversations, we just knew that, these are kind of the career options that are laid out for us. And my brother was really smart, got his distinctions and stuff, but he did not want to be a medical doctor. And he knew that. He knew that very early on, and it became this whole thing. Our parents were upset. He ended up going to do actuarial science and then ended up in the economic space. And then for me, it was like, I wanted to do medicine. As a teenager, I volunteered at the hospital. It was just a career path that I could see for myself. And I didn't immediately get into med school, so I was going to go do law. So I got into UCT. I was doing a BA law program. And in the first year, it's like doing humanity courses, and they're cool and they're nice, but I couldn't see like what career path lies here with that. And I decided to just apply to med school again. And my first day in law school, I got accepted into med school. So I transitioned to med school. I was in med school for 2 years. But you think medicine is more like biology, but it was very science. So I'm not good at chemistry, or rather just applying my mind. It takes a bit of work. So just realizing the journey ahead, I knew that it would be a struggle, but I was doing really well in the psychosocial subjects. So I went into psychology. So that's kind of what I graduated with. And I have an honors in psychology now.
Okay. So what did the parents say as you're busy jumping between these different things?
Well, they're obviously ecstatic when I got into med school, because, that's the path they want us to take. But yeah, sometimes I feel like they should have pushed harder for me not to have changed from med school. But I think I knew. Sometimes you just know things. And just like, okay, another 6 years of biochemistry, it's just, yeah. But I probably could have pushed harder or transitioned into another med school or something if there was more guidance. But I think things work out the way they're meant to work out. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then entrepreneurship. I mean, it feels like you've just been navigating the world on your own with all these little projects for years. I mean, since I met you, I never knew exactly what you did, but you're always there and you're always doing stuff.
Yes. So at university, so now I've like transitioned to psychology. The idea of being an entrepreneur never even occurred to me, because we're raised, you're going to go to university, you're going to get a job. Looking back, I actually realized that both my parents were entrepreneurs, or kind of like enterprising and doing their own thing as well. But it doesn't click in that sense of, I was just going to start my own business. But I was walking on campus one day and literally stepped on a flyer and picked it up, and it was advertising this entrepreneurship week. And it just piqued my interest, it wasn't something I thought about, but I was just like, let me attend this. So I literally went and attended this entrepreneurship week, and there we learned how to register a business. And one of the speakers was saying the way the economy is at the moment, start a business with something you can use your 2 hands and feet, so from a hobby or something, you can't, don't go open up shop and think people will just come and patronize you. So like basically start a business that isn't going to cost you anything. And what came to mind was an events company, but I was like, lots of students run an events company. I don't want to do an events company. But from societies and things I was involved in, there were things that I could do that I could organize. So I was just like, okay, events company. The name came to me during a lecture. I actually left the lecture and went and registered the business. It was called Lavish Industries. But I had no intention of doing anything with it. It was like, okay, there's business, maybe once I've graduated, something will happen. And then that Saturday is the end of the week. They had a dinner for the students and some established entrepreneurs. And the gentleman sitting next to me asked me, what do I do? So I said, I have an events company. Like I literally registered it 2 days before that. And then he said, there's an event coming up. Do I want to organize it? And I said, yes. I knew he was giving me an opportunity. I knew he knew I was a student and wasn't going to be able to, provide some kind of 5-star service. So in that moment, I spotted the opportunity and took it. So my first event was for this multimillionaire, this penthouse in Sea Point in Cape Town. And it was terrible. I think I got like food from like Pick and Pay's, Pick and Pay's like, what do you call these? Like they warm grocery stuff, like just ordered stuff from there. But yeah, he gave me some other events as well to do after that. So like, he was really supportive. And
so you didn't do too badly.
I guess not, but I look back and it's so cringe. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I could have like hired like a private chef. I mean, like, but just not having that knowledge or like, that even awareness of, where to go with that. But from there I started doing like, people's 21st birthday parties. It then went into raise formals. Eventually started doing weddings. So it just kind of like grew organically. It wasn't something I'd planned to do, but just word of mouth, opportunity, things came and I ran with it. And that's kind of like how the entrepreneurship journey started and hasn't ended.
I mean, I guess it's easy or it's easier with hindsight, but what do you think it was that when that person presented that opportunity, you just said yes, even though you also knew that to a certain extent you knew nothing about what you were saying yes to?
People often ask, like entrepreneurs born or made. So I'm leaning more towards I was just born this way. Like I can't explain it. The rest of my siblings aren't like me. But every business I've started was born out of opportunity. In that moment, something has clicked. And maybe also just entrepreneurs, like we're audacious. We just believe we can do certain things. And just having that belief that, okay, cool, just get started, perfect it on the way. But the belief that I had enough to be able to get something going. So I can't explain it, but it was just like, it wasn't something I had to really think and process. It clicked to me that, okay, here's opportunity and I'm taking it.
I mean, it feels like people have been saying kind of small business and entrepreneurship is the future for decades now. And we still have the same conversations around kind of the support, the ecosystem, like the right ecosystem to help kind of small business, particularly in Africa. What are some of the challenges, particularly with that first business? What are some of the challenges and the lessons that you then took from there to expand into your other businesses?
So it got to a point where I was just like, I'm doing all these events. People in Cape Town know me, but I'm not making any money. So it's like, okay, I'm like, okay, cool. I've got the skill, I can do stuff, but I'm not business savvy. I didn't study business. So even pricing, you don't take into effect like your petrol or just like, should you be marking up things and things like that. So I was literally speaking to a mentor of mine at the time, and I'm just like, maybe I need to get a job and just like learn some stuff. So he was just like, if I'm looking for a job, he can, I can do some stuff with him. And end up doing kind of like events and marketing related stuff. And we did Fat Joe's comedy club things in Cape Town, did things with Hot FM radio, just kind of like still in that space, kind of learning a bit more. And I'm not sure if it's even after a year or a few months, he mentioned one of the companies he's involved in is opening up head office in Joburg. They want to come up as the marketing manager. That was my phone. I'm not sure if you remember my phone with Al Patel and Nick registered. And I was just like, yes, I think at that point, I also felt like I'd outgrown Cape Town and looking for, something new. And that was 2011, moved to Joburg. And then after a year, my phone also felt like I'd learned what I could learn, and my time there was done. I didn't have another plan. I was like, okay, let me go finish my honors in psychology. Maybe wasn't too clear. And then Nick registered asked, because at the time I'd been doing some stuff with his wife Liz, a fashion designer. So he'd asked, didn't know one day, continue working with his wife and offer her services. So I thought about it, and I was just like, she had a publicist at the time who didn't get her anything. And I had managed to get her featured in like your Destiny magazine and your Elle and some other publications, just by opening up a magazine and finding a contact and reaching out. So I thought, okay, let me offer PR services. Again, like just crazy. Don't even know anything about PR, had no contacts, nothing. But I just felt that because I've been able to do something, it's something I could do. Registered a business, started offering her PR services. I think after 3 months, they were like, the one assistance with sales. And I was like, no. So now I'm sitting with a PR business. And at that time, there was this skincare brand called, I think, Michael McYalla Men. And they're offering like skincare products for Black men. I'm like, this is so cool. No one, why does anyone know about this? And I offered them free services. And after a few months, they were paying clients. And then, lots of different stories about how I ended up getting other clients, and just kind of, the PR business took off without much thought. I think after a year in the business, I was like, okay, I'm still getting quite a few clients here. Let me go study PR to make sure I'm actually doing the right thing. Took a course with UCT, and I was just like, actually, you know what, I've got this.
Because I think I met you probably not long after you moved to Joburg. Because Gerard was working with Nick and Liz with stuff, and then he was also working with Alpesh and MyPhone, because he went to Kenya for a year on the MyPhone project. So I think that's why I say, like, it always felt like you were there, but you were always very kind of quiet in the background, doing your own thing. So for me, it was also kind of just, it's like I met you and I'd interact with you and I'd see you. And then all of a sudden, one day you've got a PR agency and you're doing a whole bunch of other stuff. And for me, it felt like a jump. Whereas, I mean, as you're describing it, it was kind of, it feels like it grew organically.
Yes. Yes, I think just spotlighting, okay, here's an opportunity, what can I do with it? We're not having a solid plan. And this doesn't quite work well with Ghanaian family, because it was like, okay, you need to go back to school and get your honors, do your masters, get a job, that was always the thing. But I did feel conviction that, like, I don't want to use the word as purpose in what I'm doing. I don't think I found it as purposeful at that point, but I just felt like I can be successful at this. And it's something I wanted to keep doing. But there was this constantly pushback from family. So I knew that, okay, I had to just make sure I made it work, because if you try to ask for money from home, it's like complaints about go back to school, get a job. So yeah, it was a progression, but it was a while in the making.
Maybe you should have been in my family, because mine was the opposite. My father left teaching to go into entrepreneurship when I was very young. And I have an older sister who's a medical doctor. And my brother-in-law is a chemical engineer, I think, or mechanical, an engineer of some sort. And he was always trying to get them to go into business. And at some stage, my sister had her own practice, and then kind of she bought it and then later sold it, because she was just like, no, this is not for me. So in my family, all of those forays into random things would have been very welcome. Sometimes I feel I missed out on the work side, where going comfortably and working for somebody else, where you know that every month you get a salary. I worked for family from my teens into my 20s. So there's that side. But the grass is always greener, right?
Yes, but surprisingly, I think I'm the way I am because of the parents I had. So even though like my siblings is different and we still have the same pushback, I guess I reacted to it differently. But for me, it's just like the complaints and, you know, the things, I don't know, I want to say it fueled me more, but it gave me like, okay, you know, like if no one's going to support me, fine. I'm going to do it myself and like make a plan. And then I think after a while when they realized, but she doesn't asking for money at home, okay, maybe she's okay. Then, you know, then they just kind of let me be. But for a while, it was just like, you know, go back to school. What are you doing? Yeah,
that thing of if you go home with your tail between your legs, that feels more painful than whatever you're dealing with in the outside world. That was the case for me moving to Joburg, where for a very long time it was a major disappointment for my father. And he wanted me, I mean, he used to, for years of my being here, he used to guilt trip me a little bit on the phone, at least once a month. You know, if you're home, the business would be doing so much better. You know, if you're home, things would be so much easier. And meanwhile, I was struggling out in Joburg, like living hand to mouth. But being able to, but having to kind of go home and say, okay, do you know what? It didn't work there. So I'm coming back, felt too painful. So I was just like, I will try and make something of it, because my maybe pride or ego would not allow me to kind of go back, you know, cup in hand and go, you're right. I was wrong.
If my parents lived in Johannesburg, I would have definitely moved home, but still did my thing. But just, yeah, it's, anyways, you don't know how things will turn out. So maybe not me say, you know, but I felt like, you know, I would definitely have been like, I'll live at home. Although I've like haven't lived at home since I was 18, but yeah.
Are your parents still with us?
Yes.
How has the relationship evolved? So, I mean, so now, like you're saying, you haven't lived at home since you were 18. You know, there's the conversations, there's you going out into the world. There's them starting to recognize that actually you're all right. How has that relationship kind of evolved as you've become more than an adult, because you've gone deep into being an adult? And like in the beginning, you're still teetering in between even though you're doing your own thing, you're teetering between kind of child and adult. But now, I mean, now you're a proper adult, you're married on the other side of the world. How's that relationship evolved?
I don't want to say my parents are my friends, because I don't like, not someone like I speak to every day or whatever, but just notice, I'll probably use the word fear, but it's like when you're younger, like you don't question your parents. You don't like, it's just whatever they say that's final and it is what it is. But there's definitely kind of more, you know, open, honest conversations about certain things. Just I don't say concern for their welfare, but just acknowledging that they're older and just wanting them to be okay, and also wanting to be closer to them. So now when I think of like an ideal home situation, it's like one of those places that have like the in-law suite. And it's like, hey, y'all come live with me, that's fine. And even like, you know, in Joburg, thinking of, because they want to go retire in Ghana. But my brother is still in South Africa, you know, they want to see the grandkids. So it's just like, you know, actually, let's get a home with them in Johannesburg, you know, and then we can stay together. And even like in Ghana, it's so, I think of the future, I'm thinking of like, you know, doing more with them? How do I spend more time with them? How do I have that closeness? Just because the dynamic of a relationship with African parents, we're not necessarily like talking about dating and this type of stuff. So it's not that there's a certain closeness or friendship, but it's just like they're just people like, okay, you know, I enjoy talking to them. I want to see them. I want to spend time with them. A lot of my life lessons, just the way I am and just things I do, like I were instilled, particularly from my father, who got those things from his mother. So those things are clearer now in terms of, you know, back in the day, it was like, all these lectures, like come from Boston, and before you go back, it's like this awkward sitting in the living room conversations. But now they're just like part and parcel of who I am and things I would definitely pass on to my own kids. And, you know, it's like I see the wisdom now. There's certain things that I wish I'd asked my parents, you know, previously, but just there was never that space to do that. And then now that I'm older, I'm just like, do I just let it go? Because why do you want to bring up certain things? But I'm also like, while they're still alive, maybe I should just ask, because we're in a space where it's just like, they would probably answer from an honest place. Yeah, so it's interesting, but yeah, I love my parents so much, and you know, hope they're still around for many, many more years. My dad just turned 70 in February. My mom will be 65 later this year, but they still have so much life and energy in them.
You are listening to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast, a podcast in which I chat to Africans from a cross-section of society and sectors, including art, culture, design, business, and creativity, to name a few. We delve into their journeys, the decisions they have taken to get to where they are, how they do what they do, and everything in between. Essentially, we go wherever the spirit takes us. Now let's get back into the conversation. At what point do you realize that you are becoming your parents? And how do you deal with it? So I at 27, I think it was 27, 28 years old, started to realize that I was becoming my father. And I rebelled against it internally for a long time, because this was the person I'd rebelled against when I was a teenager. And it took to getting to my 30s where I was like just accepting of the fact that, yeah, I am like my father. And it's worse now. Like now I'm in my 50s and I find myself saying things to my kids. And as it's coming out of my mouth, I'm realizing, wait a minute, that's exactly what my father would say. That's how he would approach it. That's how you think about it.
Yes. I think for quite a while now, just in terms of I was going to say just, you know, having that entrepreneurship identity, kind of like, it's one of those where it's just, you don't want to make your work or your profession kind of be your identity, but it's one of those, it's like, it's just tagged, it's just like, you know, Sheila's like doing her own thing. It's just like, it's just been there. So just kind of seeing my siblings, just kind of like, you know, things that are happening and how we're so different. I think I did question, because like I see or attribute of the way I am to kind of like how my father raised us, you know, and just, you know, strict, no nonsense, just money doesn't grow in trees. And, you know, those things I've kind of picked up from him. Hasn't seemed to have filtered to my other siblings, and it's like weird. But a few years ago, someone recommended, it wasn't recommended in this context, but they recommended to go see a numerologist. I was like, numerologist, okay, it's interesting. Like, don't really know much about numerology, but cool. And that session, you know, blew my mind. Because you think of things like, you know, psychics, and you wonder, okay, maybe they're reading off energy for certain things, or they research things. You don't know, or you try and find ways to explain how they came to certain things. But with numerologists, where they're just like, well, your name and your birthday is giving us these numbers, and this is who you are and this is your life journey and whatever. And she described my dad to the point where only people in my immediate family would describe him like that. So lots of people will know my dad, but they would not describe him the way, the neurologist came and kind of gave his reading, and how I needed that parent to be who I am today, and just how did she describe me as a child, and this kind of like who I am now. It was really kind of like mind-opening, because it's not something I've ever really thought about, because it's like you're Christian, you have kind of one perspective, and it started making me think about, some of the Ghanaian culture actually with naming ceremonies, and how they believe that, a child being born on a certain day is like, they chose to come on a Monday. So they chose to be a Kojo or Najwa or whatever. So it's like you came with something. So it's like, you came on this day and that was your name, and it kind of like gives you this, life trajectory or whatever. So kind of like could see the pieces fit a bit more in terms of, okay, even though I'm different to my dad, it's like his impact has made me who I am today. And although I'm very different to my mom, I am seeing that now in ways I am becoming her. And I have a beautiful 5-year-old Berna's daughter, and I'm also seeing in terms of things that I say, I'm just like, oh my gosh, am I now that African mother? Where it's just like, it just can't stop it. But, I'm just like, but actually I believe this is the right way to do this, or, a valid response. So I think definitely there are things that I carry from both parents, and that I'll probably continue to do it. And even though like sort of things my mom was like exaggerated around, it's almost like superstitious, now there's kind of just in different ways around kind of like boundaries and space. But, just sort of things you're like, actually, no, you don't need to tell people certain things. You don't need to like let people in your space in some ways. And I definitely see that more and more every day.
Yeah, no, people had wisdom, and we carry that wisdom. And we've carried that wisdom through time. Unfortunately, with history, what happens is that connection to those things gets broken to a certain extent. And like you're saying, I'm always kind of telling the story of kind of like your Kosi name or your day name, because people say, what does Kojo mean? Because I live in a part of the world where it's a unique name. And I'm like, well, if you go to Ghana, you'll meet many of us. But at the same time, it's the day the soul decided to be born. So your parents give you your other names, but that name is the name that the soul chose. And there's value in those things. And I mean, some of the habits, sometimes I find myself questioning. Like I used to get smacked for giving anything with my left hand. And now I find that with my children, I wasn't as strict with it. My father was very strict with it. And sometimes when they give me something in the left hand, like instinctively, I want to go, what the hell are you doing? And then I'm like, I can't remember why we don't do it.
Can I tell you?
Yes, please do tell me.
So the left hand is used for dirty things, particularly around cleaning up after your food. So if that's the hand you use for certain things, then definitely don't be accepting and shaking people's hands and things like that with your left hand. So it's just seen as the hand that's for dirty things, the other hand, the clean hand, it's like you're eating and stuff like that. So,
but at the same time, like in the modern era, the reason I was questioning that is because like I know people are left-handed, and it's kind of like, so what I find when we have these conversations, when I have these conversations with different people, depending on their context. So I wasn't raised in any particular religion. So it's easier for me to kind of navigate the different ones and to a certain extent pull from pull what I consider beneficial from different religions and different cultures, also because I've lived and grown up amongst different cultures, is this idea of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So it's like one thing doesn't make sense, and we can have a discussion around that. So that the left hand thing is the one thing where, like, I kind of buy into everything else, but I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know about this. Like one of my closest friends growing up was left-handed, and he's now ambidextrous because I think he had a cast put on his left hand to force him to use his right hand. And he wasn't Ghanaian, but because the idea that the left hand, you don't use your left hand for certain things.
My younger sister is left-handed, and I remember my dad telling us, like, the family, like, if you were left-handed, it's one of those, you were trained not like to be right-handed because just
yeah,
it was a thing, but they chose us to leave her to be left-handed. But it does come with certain things where it's just like they have their special scissors, like there's just different things, and just there's lots of consideration where you just don't think about.
Yeah.
But I'm 100% sure if she gives anyone anything with her left hand, they're still like, don't use your left hand.
Let's just shift a little bit, because out of all your businesses, the one that fascinates me the most is front page media. Like, what is with all these online magazines in an industry that I used to be part of and a lot of us see as dying?
Whew. Well, media is never going to die.
Yes, media is never going to die. Oh, let me say storytelling. So for me, everything is storytelling, right? So storytelling is not going to die. But yes. you have how many? 1, 2, 3. So what? Mosaic, Batswadi, the music review, front page, and Previda. That's a lot.
Yes. And it's for a lot of people might just seem to be like come out of the blue, but it's been in like the works for a while, where something starts with as a seed in the mind, and then it's like, okay, cool, when opportunity comes, certain pieces put together and kind of plays out. So I think it was 2018. The idea of a publication for the PR company, so kind of this more, I guess it'll be more kind of like industry-based information, but timing is everything, and things were busy. I wasn't trying to start, anything new, but it was like, okay, the idea of having like a PR online magazine or kind of blog for the website. Then you kind of assess in terms of what kind of coverage clients are getting, and you're like, okay, cool. There are all these new blogs coming up, but they're all copying content from Times Live or, whatever other publication. Not many people actually putting out original content. So it's like, okay, there's definitely a gap for like more media publications, because, being the PR space, and like, we want more platform for clients. And Mosaic was born in that kind of area where it was like, okay, how do you have a platform that kind of speaks to, what we're doing? Had some business partners in that one, and kind of kickstarted the journey of, okay, have an online publication. Definitely wasn't trying to do anything print. I think at that time, I think Condé Nast had mentioned a lot of the titles were just like verbally, were not even going to print anymore. And just the trend was kind of going towards online. Then at some point, it's like, okay, cool, we're putting all this effort into one publication. We have the template, so why not just put out 5 other ones and just kind of like go at it, in a group, because it's like, once you can do something, it's easier to replicate. And the idea is to kind of like build to sell. I think there's strategically maybe some I would keep, because having your own platform, you're able to leverage that in certain ways. But there's just kind of like, there's a gap in the markets, and then lots of publications closed down. And I still think we need a lot more online platforms, because a lot of it almost, you look and you think, oh, the place is saturated, because you think that there's a lot, but okay, yes, a lot of people speaking the same things, not enough defined niche, different type of stuff. So I think there's still a lot more room there. The online publication is like one facet of it that's kind of come alive in terms of didn't really cost much. I think, the podcast space is definitely, one that people need to be in. I think this video production and just releasing video format content in general versus kind of like written articles is definitely where the shift needs to happen. And I think just what sort of offers, okay, here's a gap. What can I do with it? And then I guess, sometimes purpose kicks in and just saying, you know what, we don't have enough platforms that are kind of putting Black people and African people at the forefront and telling our stories for ourselves, for ourselves with our narrative. Because you'd always see, so-and-so the first Black person on Glamour, so-and-so. It's like, we're a majority Black country, how are we still having these first milestones? And when content's being put out, it's like, even trying to find stock images, we can't find stock images of people who look South African. It's just like, Africa, there's just so much, there's a huge gap in you realizing that, how people perceive and receive stuff, says a lot. So my younger sister, there's a huge gap. She's a lot Lameki. So how she grew up is very different from us. So growing up, she had those kind of, a lot of Black role models and like, the stand, like, you're not walked by your standard of beauty because you can see dark-skinned people, magazines and in campaigns and things like that. So it's just like, when people say representation matters, you actually see that, like, cool, someone can tailor content to you, but then when it's positioned to you, you're like, how am I seeing, let's say, like AI people who don't even look, real? How am I seeing people that look Somalian, but you're trying to tell me about something happening in the Eastern Cape? You know what I mean? So it's one of those disconnects where it's like, there's strides being made to kind of make content relevant for certain markets, but how far are we taking it? Certain people who've had monopolies, that's the stuff that's out there, and we'll be intentional about putting out content that says, actually, this is for us, this can resonate with us. And I just think, 100% with the, storytelling, it's always going to be there. And I think we can see in today's age how easy it is to erase history and to change narratives. So it's important to document things and to be at the forefront to keep telling our own stories.
So without sharing your secrets, how do you maintain that as a business? Because so I've always believed the bigger challenge with media, especially as it evolved or devolved, depending on where you're standing, particularly like magazine and stuff, is we often had a conversation. We often had the social and emotional conversation, which is, we don't have enough platforms telling our stories, et cetera, et cetera. And I always felt like the part of the conversation that was always being left out is the business side of it. Because it's all well and good, it's easy to create a website. It's easy to, it's easier for me to kind of go, okay, this is editorial thread, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, I've often had people going, why don't you start your own magazine? And I'm like, I don't have the energy or the money to deal with something like that. So how do you handle the business side of, because also it's multiple publications and there needs to be a team, you need contributors, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I edit a magazine now that only puts out a newsletter once a month because I don't have time to write regularly for it. And I have no budget to get other people to write for it. So we take contributions, like we take contributions. If you've written something somewhere and you want to amplify it, I can put it on the platform. But that's just because the people that, own the publications, like, look, right now we don't have the funds to bring on contributors.
Yes. So I think the beauty of starting my first business as a student, where I didn't really have responsibilities and was able to invest in the business myself. So whilst other people maybe were using pocket money to buy new clothes, I was busy trying to get business cards and things like that. So I think that kind of like early foundation of, if I'm starting a business, I don't need to look outside for funding. Let me see what I can do with kind of the resources that I have and work at that pace. I think it's helped me in terms of I'm able to kind of like get started, because I'm like, I'll put in what I can and just make it work. And the idea of I want to build and get to a point where it's something where I'm not worried about, the money. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep it alive. I wanted to get to a certain point where I'm able to monetize it, and I'm going to kind of stay that course. So it's not like, we do something today and then like 6 months, we quiet for 6 months and then come up again. It'll keep up the consistency. But doing this was really much about the end game, where it's just like, it has to make sense financially. And yes, there's certain things where I can monetize like today that I haven't capitalized on opportunities that are just like lying on the table, because it's like I'm running a PR business and many things, and it's almost like the side hustle. But I did tell myself, like I can't keep starting, new side hustles. You can't take 5-10 years to get something to get a point where springboards. It needs to be like, okay, 2 years, it needs to jump. So now I'm at the point I'm just like, okay, there's momentum of the publications, and I can't keep taking my own PR business and putting it in business. At some point I need to actually enjoy the fruits of my labor. So now I kind of challenge myself to be like, okay, cool, now it's time to actually action in this, the business plan. Because from setting covers to just events to sponsor posts, people do make inquiries and, is money coming in, but we haven't actively, gone and done stuff. So now I'm in a space, I'm like, okay, cool. A lot of brands, that's kind of like their, very few brands still have like a print budget or TVC budget. A lot of people are spending 100% of their budgets, online. So it's like you could literally treat a publication as if it was an influencer and saying, okay, cool, what kind of campaigns can you do with brands? How can you supplement other existing campaigns? How do you tap into stuff? So people who've come to us was more so about, okay, we see the visibility in the audience. So they've been kind of like low-hanging, wins that we haven't really had to fight for. But I do believe that there is a lot of gap in capacity there, but I don't think the actual magazines would be where the big money is. I think you definitely have a model where it sustains itself, because we're not having that huge overheads, but I think the production side of content making, not just putting it out, but actually creating it as well. I think that's where the true value may lie.
Don't you? So I do a bunch of different things. I keep on taking like random projects. And I'm coming out of a period of feeling extremely overwhelmed in terms of managing different projects. It's not like fully fledged businesses like you're dealing with. It's me and like my little, I do the podcast. I have a couple of clients. I do some writing, and then I have kids and I have a family. And like I said, I'm coming out of I hope I'm coming out of it, but I'm coming out of a patch where I've been feeling extremely overwhelmed by all the things that I need to get done. And that's usually when I lose sight of, let's call it, my process. Don't you, with all of these things to kind of keep track of, including new country, family, etc., don't you ever feel overwhelmed? And how do you manage that? Like, how do you manage all of these different things?
Yes, definitely. I think for me, when I get overwhelmed, then I realize, okay, cool, I'm not delegating enough. Because why am I doing everything? Like, I'm doing too much. Then I know, okay, cool, I need to take stock and be like, okay, I'm paying quite a few people. Is this something that I can delegate? So it makes you realize I'm not managing my time properly, because you find you get in the rat ways. For me, it's like, okay, I'm doing a million things and then this is due now. So I can't delegate it because it's quick if I do it. And then so I'll have periods where I'm delegating really well and I'm working very few hours and, things are fine. Then I'll find, okay, cool, now I'm doing stuff, and you get into that cycle of just getting back into doing things because you can do it. So I think my goal this year is really, the word delegation is key there. It's not easy. People it's called a balancing act is what. I think what really drives me maybe is just kind of the passion and fuel, but passion and fuel doesn't pay bills, it doesn't do things, so you have to be at the point where it's like with family, you need the time, you need the energy, just the space, the mental capacity. I'm working towards getting to the point where it's like I can take months off and, not worry about, money or what's happening in business, because things are running smoothly. And Front Page is the last one that I'm heavily involved in, that I'm like, okay, I need to get a team to a point where they're able to run with things without kind of like coming back to me and checking on things and things like that. So I realized my problem was a system problem. So I can do some things, but my team don't necessarily know kind of like what the processes are. So I've got people on the day-to-day stuff, they can do that now. But if I'm bringing on a new client today, that onboarding process and this kind of next few steps, there were gaps there. So I'd find myself now and I'm stuck in there. And if, I haven't onboarded a client properly, now the team don't know what to do. They haven't started because I haven't sent them stuff. So I had to take stock and be like, okay, I need better systems or processes in place where it's just like it's a template. So I'm trying to challenge myself to be like, okay, cool. I'm that entrepreneur. But when I did start, end vision was not to be the person who was, still doing the day-to-day work. And I think you get stuck in there because the buck lies with you, the accountability is with you. If something isn't happening well, it's like your reputation is on the line. So I've been heavily involved in stuff, I think, for too long now. And I'm at the point where I'm just like, with family and, the changing of how my life will be, I can't be trying to be doing things at 2 o'clock in the morning or doing a million things. So I need to be able to upskill my team or get the right people involved that can, help with certain processes. So I think that's definitely been something on my radar this year, to be like, okay, every business needs proper systems in place. So if I'm not, actively involved, I'm not around, how do you get things to kind of live? And I think just the idea around succession planning, or just kind of like, with your life, what happens next? You build something that's just die with you when you die. So those kind of, thoughts and ideas and discussions are happening. And I'm like, okay, I need to put more systems in place, my business, and have more people know what's happening so that, the people can do the work, but it's, if they don't know how to acquire the client or kind of retain the client, the other things that they don't see, someone needs to know what's happening. So I think just putting that systems in place, I think has become a high priority for me now.
Because some people, it's said that some people are good at starting things and others are good at kind of building them. The building them being kind of creating that bureaucracy to a certain extent, the systems and stuff. I can tell you I'm good at starting stuff. Like I have great ideas and I can initiate things. but I suspect I get bored once it gets past a certain point. Would you say you fall either or is it an and?
I think it's an and. I think I'm good at starting things and seeing them through. I think what I'm realizing now, again, like, although I'm not too sure, because people do go study business and, don't necessarily have their own businesses or write successful businesses. So that might not have solved the problem, but just kind of like going organically in the entrepreneurship journey, sort of things haven't been thought through. So it's like, you do something in it. But the idea of like, how do you scale and how do you do those things? It's like, it's almost like that fear blocker that comes because we'll test out and we'll bring someone who's maybe, at a higher pay level, hoping that they would, be able to do more so you can get more business and things like that. And then things don't really happen and you just realize you had this like, go a dead weight, but just kind of like a cash draining, resource that didn't make sense. So not knowing exactly kind of what's needed, kind of so that the idea of, okay, cool, I want to scale, but then you almost like take 2 steps forward and then you back again. You're like, okay, I can manage things. I'm doing it better because I know what I need to do. But it's like, okay, we know our businesses intrinsically. So someone, even if they have run businesses, still needs to understand what to be able to do, what they can do. So I think a lot of things are in my head. I'm like, okay, certain processes, those need to be documented down. So a lot of things that live with me, that kind of is the source of my business. Because it's like, okay, how am I able to retain clients for so long? Or what draws people to my business? Because there's a million publicists out there. So just trying to understand that in the process and just, what's important and trying to kind of see how do you get people in place. And I think just reading business books and, listening to podcasts and other entrepreneurs and their journey and businesses that have managed to scale, it's very apparent that, to succeed, you need to be able to replace yourself. So if you are the person who's still doing everything and just, if you're removed, your business crumbles, then your business can't grow. And yeah, so the idea of, okay, replacing myself is where I'm at when it's like, okay, how do I remove myself out of the equation and have businesses run? Something I'd love to strive for.
So as we wind down, what's exciting you right now, just in general?
I think just the next. It's scary but exciting. So scary in the sense of I'm used to just, being this person, I get things done, I'm running my business, you working hard now so that, when I have my kids in future, I'm able to live the life that I want, and not, worry about income. So kind of getting things in place that almost give you passive income. And then it's like you arrive at the point where it's like, but you're here now, have all these things in place, I had a newborn baby tomorrow, would the business just continue and, things would be fine without me intervening? Like, no. So there's a bit more urgency of actually, all these books and podcasts and things you've been reading, you put these things into action now because I've been doing this for so long where it's almost felt like I've been doing things for everybody else. I've been pouring into everyone else's businesses, everyone else's brands. It's like, how do I take stock for me? So I'm excited to be in a space where I'm just like, I can just be. I can just take time off. I can think about, family in the next part of my journey. Thinking about, holidays with my family, spending more time to kind of building that community. I'm almost like in a space where I'm just like, community. And that's kind of like a priority. So even things I do is like, I don't want to take this job. No, it's not worth it. Let me not bother with that. So I think it excites me to be in a position where I'm just not chasing anything, and I'm trying to do things with more intention. But yeah, I think just family life excites me, but also scares me because it's going to be very different for me.
What do you do when you're not working? What does just being look like?
Doing yoga, cooking, going for walks, going to farmers markets. Although work is a big part of, what I do, like some people would be like, why are you working all the time? Like, it is something I genuinely enjoy, but I am trying to be like, what, certain things can wait. Even though because my mind is always moving with ideas. It's like, how to get that stillness and just not worry about that. And yeah, I really enjoy my weekends where it's like going to farmers market, things are chilled, enjoying sunshine, enjoying nature, going to petting zoos, the 5-year-old. So that's what fills my time when I'm not looking.
I wish you more of that and less of work.
Thank you. I claim that.
Thank you for the time. It's awesome chatting to you.
Thanks for having me. It was nice just to reflect on life, and it's been a journey, but I definitely appreciate the lessons and the journey that's come.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. Please leave a review and subscribe. Check out the show notes for links to the guest, the podcast, and myself. I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed having it.